Great.
Okay, I think I have to press that. Okay, are we all set?
Yes.
Great, all right. Well, again, welcome to Second Saturday Conversation. Let me just a quick note. You all receive, once you've RSVP'd for the Second Saturday Conversation, you will receive a link, but in our RSVP, it reminds you that we send the link out the day before and the morning of Second Saturday. So even if you have RSVP'd a couple of weeks in advance, which is great, but we send out the link Friday and then on Saturday morning. And I think that's so that it doesn't maybe get lost in your files. So that's just a reminder. And also we do record these, and thank you, Megan, for making sure this one is, and we post them online. And sometimes it takes several days for us to get that posted. So just know that these sessions are going to be on the website, and be patient with us if you were hoping it was going to be up a little sooner than it gets there, but it will get there. So, all right. So that being said, it's wonderful to have you here, part of this conversation about Christianity in and for the 21st century. And the overall topic, theme, canopy, umbrella for this year is telling the story again, telling the Christian story again, anew. All right. Last year's theme was going home to another way, going home to another way. This year, we're actually exploring the same idea, but I'm just using slightly different language to get to it. Telling the story again, anew. I think that all of us who are tuned into Second Saturday are somewhat haunted by Christianity. We may still be in church, we may, which I hope you are, but we realize that Christianity is not, it's become captive, and to a number of things. I'm going to get to that in a few minutes, but it's become captive to certain kinds of thinking. And we really need to liberate Christianity so that its full heart can be seen and experienced and exposed. Okay. So I think that those of us who are part of Second Saturday, we haven't given up on Christianity yet, but we know that it's time for change. We need to understand it and express it differently. And that's part of what we're exploring together, is how to go about that. Okay. And I think that even in these troubled times, and I think Christianity is in a troubled time, that there is something new that can emerge, even like the blooming of a rose in a desert land. And so let me quote from Isaiah 35, verse 1 and 2, that summarizes my sense of what we're about this year. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. Megan, do you want to orient us a little bit to mics and preparing for plenary time and all of that?
Yes, wonderful. Good morning. Just a reminder to please keep yourselves muted throughout the morning unless you are called upon. If you do have questions or comments during the conversation, please direct them to the chat. We will want to use the chat space as a place for your comments related to the topic for the day. We'll draw from that chat space for our plenary session, and if you want to be called upon, you can also indicate that in the chat. Before the plenary, we will give you a few minutes to write any comments or questions you need in that chat space. We will have a plenary at the end of the presentation with Jeff Cresswell, our moderator. This will be a time to reflect on the thoughts and ideas shared by Mary Ann. And if you would like to personally connect with Marianne, we are offering a coffee time from 11 to 11:15 after the presentation and plenary. Again, if you have any questions during the conversation, please direct them to the chat. Please keep yourselves muted unless you are called upon. Jeff Cresswell and myself will be monitoring the chat section. And then during the plenary, Jeff will call on you to ask your question or share your thoughts, at which time you can unmute yourself. Thank you so much for your time and space, and enjoy the morning.
Thanks, Megan. And I could not do this without Megan's help. So I'm just so glad that she's with us. In thinking about Christianity for the 21st century and Christianity in the 21st century, I think that it will be helpful to review a little bit about how thinking has changed over the centuries, right? So this is a way to remind us where we've been and actually where we are. I think most of us are still catching up to postmodernity. But today I want to do a brief summary of modernity, postmodernity, and then two mirrored categories that came up last time with Jack Caputo: structuralism and post-structuralism. Modernity and postmodernity have to do with how we understand and see reality. Structuralism and post-structuralism, how we understand language. Now, I mean, doesn't this sound like fun? Aren't you glad you tuned in? Hopefully this won't be too technical, but I found reviewing these categories helpful in my own thinking, and I'm curious to know from you how you see all of this. Let me also mention that how we understand reality used to be under the purview of religion and philosophy. It was religion and philosophy that helped us define and determine what is real and so forth. Now, I think that reality is really the domain of the sciences. How do we understand reality? But philosophy and religion still have a really important function. They help us to understand our relationship to what is, our relationship to reality, how our relationship to one another in the midst of the world, and how we story that, and how we live that, and how we hope and dream and wonder in our world. Okay, so religion and philosophy are still, I think, really important disciplines and lenses through which to help us see. But let me just briefly review how some categories of discerning reality. The pre-modern world, okay, before the 17th century, the pre-modern world, there were really no distinctions between the world and the gods. Modernity, which was signaled by the Enlightenment, 17th, 18th century. In fact, it was called the Great Age of Reason. The Great Age of Reason. Modernity suggested that there are strictly defined categories that we understand that in which reality fits. Okay, there are pure categories that help us organize. There are fixed interpretations of how we are to understand. Okay, the modern period was characterized by a kind of binary thinking, a kind of either or thinking, like object, subject, rational, irrational, science, faith, speech, writing, man, woman, light, dark, white, non-white, Western, Oriental, presence, absence. These binary categories were considered to be, as I said, pure categories. And the first term in binary thinking is privileged. So that has shaped a way of thinking from the 17th century all the way up to about 1940. 1940 and then really more 1960s and 70s. That era, how we started to think about reality and how things work and all of that, that era was called postmodern. Okay, the postmodern era. And I think some of us are still catching up to postmodern. By the way, there might be something beyond postmodern. My hunch is it's going to be more towards poetics. Okay, but there will be some who will say that postmodern has to do with AI, artificial intelligence, and the future beyond the human. Well, I'm still really concerned about the future for the human and of the human. So I'm not anywhere near AI and a post-human future, but there are some people I think who are starting to think about that. So postmodernity, hints of it in the 1940s, 1960s, 70s is when it's really started to open up. The postmoderns is a critique of modernity. And postmodernism says, no, there aren't pure categories. Nothing is really fixed. Everything is subject to interpretation. And the binary, this either or, black, white, good, evil, these seemingly strict categories, they're really insufficient in explaining our experience of the world and of life, okay? Postmoderns will say, you know, we live in between these categories, and these are not pure categories anyway. So postmodern challenges the binary and underscores that our experience of reality is really important, that reason is not the ultimate arbiter of, do I dare say it, of truth. Okay, there are different ways of knowing. Okay? And the human experience is important. So postmodernity is less concerned about making a better argument for this and that, as it is saying we need a better narrative of how we experience life. And postmoderns will say, you know, meaning is more fluid than fixed. And maybe they're not universals. Maybe things really aren't all predictable. Okay. So this is kind of the postmodern push. A lot of us are still in modernity, I think, in terms of how we think, and that is the norm. Okay. Postmoderns say, you know, we've really, really moved beyond that. Now, there is a shadow side to this. And I think we see this being played out in our culture today, that if there aren't fixed understandings of law, let's say, or there's not fixed understandings of what is truth and what is not truth, what is fact and what is not fact. The people, those in power, the elites, if you will, those in power can make good use of that ambiguity to still serve their own agenda. Okay. So the fact that things aren't fixed, I mean, there's a liberation in this, in my opinion, okay? But there's also a shadow side where if things are all interpreted, then perhaps things can be manipulated in a way, okay? And then that becomes chaotic. Now, I don't think postmoderns' interest, or Theo just brought me his ball. Okay, honey, go get that. I don't think postmodern intends towards chaos. It says that systems and systems thinking has to open up. It has to open up. So it's not anti-system as much as it is kind of a quasi-system. Okay. But as I said, there's a shadow side, but I also think there's something very liberating about the postmodern way of thinking. And Jack Caputo would say that radical theology, okay, how are we going to think about God in the midst of all of this? That radical theology is calls us to think differently and think radically. And I would say to spring loose from the modern worldview and construct, because what is at hand and the sense of what is possible is much, much broader than what the modern worldview has suggested. Okay. So let me do a quick little thing about structuralism and post-structuralism. By the way, I'm not a scholar. I read them, and then this is what I'm gleaning and what I'm thinking. And some of you may know these areas certainly better than I, so I'd love to hear from you. Okay. Structuralism is, I think, how language is understood under the category of modernity. Okay, because structuralists believe that the mind is built in a certain way that assumes certain firm laws, that there's a common framework or structure around which the world is constructed through language, and that things are more fixed and language is more fixed. Language is more, it denotes, okay? That's the structuralist understanding. And I think it's a mirror image of modernity in how we understand language. Modernity, how we understand reality. Structuralism is how we understand language. But it's the same assumptions. Post-structuralists say, no, language is not actually a closed system, that language is living. It's a living thing. It evolves. Language evolves. That language is more open-ended. That language in itself is searching. Okay. That there are certain conventional ways of thinking which are more modern, that excludes a whole bunch of possibilities and people for that matter, and that post-structuralism suggests that we need to become more attentive to how our language excludes. And that language doesn't have just one purpose, that language can create new meanings. And post-structuralists say that language is more rhetorical rather than denotes, okay? And that language itself can create a new game. So that there is a kind of creativity in the evolution of language, which also mirrors our evolution of thought, that actually could reach a point where there's a breakthrough, where there's really, as Jack would name it last time, a new game, that there's a really new way of seeing things. Okay? Post-structuralists also say, you know, we are storytellers. We're storytellers. So we seek meaning, we seek expression and all of that. So this post-structuralist will say things are just much more dynamic than the modern view and that structuralism would suggest. Now, from these two things, from post-structuralism comes deconstruction. And one of the tasks of deconstruction, okay, because deconstruction, that came about in the 60s, and it was Jacques Derrida who basically expressed the understanding of deconstruction, okay? And Jack will tell us it has a long lineage that goes way back even to St. Paul, of that the wisdom of the wise is challenged and actually subverted by what we might consider as foolish. Okay, that's a little variation on, that's an early way of understanding deconstruction. But the task of deconstruction is to examine these binary oppositions in which the first term is privileged. So it calls into question the binary. And in a sense, it's turning all these classical assumptions of how the world works upside down. And some would say that that's an undermining of classical education, because it's displacing a system that's been in place for a long time, okay? This deconstruction, this opening things up, this saying that things are much more dynamic and subject to interpretation and change. We see this kind of examination going on in a variety of disciplines, from literature to feminism to post-colonialism to psychoanalysis to politics, and certainly to theology, which is radical theology is sort of the it's part of the dream of deconstruction. Okay, some have said that deconstruction is a faith that's searching for the dream, searching for what else is possible. Okay, and I think that's not everybody who understands understands deconstruction in that way, but I love that because I think that suggests something very powerful about the positive dimension of deconstruction. Let me also say that even though we are saying that everything is subject to interpretation, at the heart of, I think, deconstruction, and certainly at the heart of Christianity, is a sense, and I would say the humanists too, that there is a sense that there is a deep instinct. We may not want to call it a structure anymore, but a deep instinct in us that is responding to something that we discern as a call that is related to how are we to live our life in a way that is worthy of the gift of life. We're very aware, we're mortal. We defy that or try to all the time or deny it. But our mortality, our death, underscores how precious and particular our life is. And there's a deep, deep sense in us human beings that we're aware of that. So how do we respond to the gift of life in such a way that is worthy of this very gift? Okay. For me, in spite of all this interpretation and what seems to be a lot of ambiguity, I hold to the fact that there's something deep in us that longs for and is, if you will, good, that asks, what is it to be kind? What is it to be compassionate? What is it to love your neighbor? What is it to love your God? What do I love when I say I love my God? How are we to live in this world? And I think that this move in post-structuralism and post-modernity opens up, okay, Theo, it invites us to explore what is possible and what some would say is impossible. It's sort of boundary shattering, okay? And it suggests that there are possibilities for breakthroughs for a different understanding of reality and how things work and behave and act. Now, I'm going to give you a little analogy for this from physics. A particle can become a wave. A particle is a particle and a wave. Okay. And what is suggested is that how it is observed, or that it is observed, can change a particle to become a wave. And some would say, how can a particle become a wave? That's impossible. It's either this or this. But no, physics says no, a particle can become a wave. Okay? Depending upon how it's observed is how some talk about it. Now, is that because being observed, it changes? Or is it as we observe that we see something we didn't see before? Okay. Another way to describe this is to say when a particle goes through an opening, and I'm not sure I can define any of that, okay? But when a particle goes through an opening, it changes and becomes something else, okay? It becomes something else. And and that something else really defies what we think is possible in the classical world. Okay. So we see this in physics, which has to do with the nature of reality, all right? That that there can exist something that we don't think is possible to exist. Now, I would like to use that as a point of reference or a parable or even a proof text for the fact that, yes, things can really transform. Things can really become something new, okay? And I think that what physics is pointing to is absolutely fascinating. And I think it should challenge and excite our imagination. Let me say that, collect my thoughts a little bit. With Christianity, Christianity began as its own kind of, we didn't have the word deconstruction then, but Jesus challenged the taken for granted assumptions of how the world should be ordered, that hierarchical domination system that Marcus talks so much about. Jesus says, you know, that's not the only way to structure the world. He had this deep instinct, but that's not the ultimate. And isn't it interesting that the word hierarchy, higher, is a word for holy? So a hierarchy was already named as something that was of divine order. Okay, but think of what the hierarchy excludes. So Jesus says, you know what, I have a vision that there's a different way of ordering the world and our lives that is more in keeping with the heart of and soul and wonder of who we are. And he challenged the strict laws of, you know, it's like, no, you can heal on the Sabbath. And some would say, no, the Sabbath is, you know, you can't, because the law is the fixed thing and we need to accommodate that. Okay. That's what keeps it in order. Okay. And Jesus defied all of that. And so the thing that I think is sort of interesting is that Jesus and his vision of what the world could be like if, and Marcus identifies these categories, that a politics of compassion, that the quote I put up in the beginning from Mark's book, The God We Never Knew, talks about Jesus' vision as the politics of compassion, okay? That the hierarchical domination system run by the elites is not, that's not the ultimate quote unquote reality, okay? And how he images the vision of what this kind of different world would be is the kingdom of God, which includes the nobodies and the outcast and the disempowered and those that are not in the pure categories, you know, that the pure, impure, honor, shame, binary understanding of Jesus' world. Jesus was a boundary shatterer, and you know, he got killed for it. Okay, but he saw something else. He had a sense of this other vision of how we can be. What is interesting to me is that, well, let me say, so here's this vision from Jesus and of the kingdom of God. And then around the 4th century, this Jesus movement becomes the property of the empire. So then this narrative about another way of being becomes captive, if you will, to empire. And then in modernity, Christianity becomes captive to a binary way of understanding the world and a closed system. And we talk about Christianity that way too. This is what this means. that if you do this, you'll be saved. It's in or out. It's wheat and chaff. It's, and it's saved, not saved. And this is why, because this is what this means. Postmodernity comes along and post-structuralism and says, it's not, our understanding of the world really isn't that, it's not that tight. It's, for instance, it's like, let's think about Jesus walking on the water. A modern view might try to make that some kind of scientific claim. Postmoderns will say, no, I'm not going to argue that did Jesus really walk on the water? It's like, what is the affirmation underneath the notion that Jesus walks on water? What is the affirmation that that story is holding? Could it be something like being in a changing world where the currents are changing all the time, but the undertow won't get you? Okay. Or the feeding of the 5,000. Do we want to argue, was it 5,000? Was it 4,000? Were there women and children? Do we want to do that kind of analysis of that? Or do we want to say, that story, meal practice was so important to Jesus, meal practice and a discipleship of equals, and that everyone should be fed. Everyone should be provided for, is that a way of saying there's a way to redistribute this? There's a different way to care for the people. There's a different way to distribute what we have, okay? And 4,000, 5,000, it's a way of saying for everybody, okay? So that's a more maybe postmodern, post-structural way. It's a more metaphorical way. It's a more poetic way of understanding this kind of stuff, but it's a different way of thinking. It's not creating an argument so much as it is suggesting that there is a different narrative that might be addressing our concerns, our longings, our needs, the needs of the world. Okay, if this makes any sense. So Christianity has become captive to empire, still is, captive to modernity. And here we are in post-modernity, post-structuralism. And I would like to think that this is an opportunity for Christianity itself to reimagine itself and to be freer from some of the assumptions of the modern era and tell its story again anew with this more deconstructionist vision, which is seeking a vision of the dream of what it can really be possible in human life and in the world. Okay. And the possibilities of love, compassion, transformation, acceptance of death in a way that helps us cherish our life. And all of this in the name of God. Okay. Modernity did the damnedest things in the name of God. And well, our history has. By our sort of absolute, defined definitions of what is and what isn't. And what we have, so much blood has been spent in the name of God and in the name of Jesus because of a certain way of thinking about the world and reality. Okay. We're being set free from that. As I said, there is a shadow side. Okay. But what I think we're being called to do is to be more responsible for our claims, more responsible for why we think the way we do, rather than saying, well, it's in the Bible, I read it, that's it. God said it, I read it, it's in the Bible, this is it, it's done. It's like, no, what is the story? What is the biblical story? What's stirring in that? what is the deeper affirmation, or how is the story being even manipulated to serve those in power? How is knowledge made captive to serve those in power? Okay. I think that we are in a really interesting period in our history. And we may be struggling with all of this. And we're not sure how it's going to turn out. Okay. There are no guarantees with how this is going to go. There's a lot of risk in the post-structural, postmodern world. Okay. But there always has been. There always has been. Love is a risk. Love is a risk. But I think we have an opportunity to enter into a different way of being and thinking that, if we make it, and if it is as life-giving as I hope it can be, it will be a kind of event that we can say, well, God was in this. There was possibility. There is more life. What I'd like to say to all of you, because most of you are in my age cohort, we've seen a lot of change in our lifetime, and we are in a period of really dramatic change right now, and it's disorienting, and there's a lot of ambiguity, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and I appreciate that it doesn't look good for the planet. And it's like, oh my gosh, and there is going to be no rescuer from the sky who's going to come down and clean up the mess, as Don Crossan says. It's not that God is going to come and clean up the mess. That's not going to happen. The call to a deeper, better, more loving, more compassionate life, we hear it. We know it. And our response is what is going to make the difference. Our response is what is going to make the difference. So we're in a time of turmoil and dis-ease. Oops. That's my little boy. There must be somebody outside. And yet what I say to you all is that we, though, can see possibilities for a better future. It's like Martin Luther King saying, I may not get there with you. We may die before anything is really, before this new age is really going to come into blossom, which I hope it will. But like Martin Luther King saying, I may not get there with you, but I've been to the mountaintop and I have seen the promised land. I have seen it. I have a dream that one day, okay, because I've seen it. Okay, I'd like to say that us guys in my age cohort, that we're seeing a light of some possibilities, and we may not see it fulfilled. But I want us to keep that hope, that dream, that love, that sense of possibility and even impossibility. A particle can become a wave. Impossible. No, it can. To let that be our light on the horizon, and to know we are part of that. We're part of that now. We may not see it fulfilled, but we're part of that. As a way to give you an image of what I'm trying to get at here, let me close my comments, my chat. I'm going to read you a poem by Denise Levertov, and this poem is based on the story in Luke 2, which was Simeon coming into the temple for Jesus' circumcision. Simeon was an old man, but he was hoping that he would see salvation before he died. And he beholds Jesus in the temple and says, mine eyes have seen my salvation. So now your servant can depart in peace because I've seen it. Okay. I think that Denise Levertov catches this in a beautifully elegant way. So let me read this to you, and then I'll explain why I think this poem is about us. With certitude, Simeon opened ancient arms, like ours, opened ancient arms to infant light. Decades before the cross, the tomb, and the new life. What depth of faith he drew on, turning illumined toward deep night. Okay. I suggest that Simeon, we are like Simeon. Simeon opened ancient arms. He was an old guy, to infant light, which I think is a beautiful image of how to describe the infant Jesus. Okay. That in Jesus, the light of the world, as some of the stories say, this is the light of the world. This is illumining something about human nature. Okay. So he opened his arms to infant light. I would say we are opening our arms to an infant light. It isn't fully in view yet, but we have a glimmer of a dream. And I dare say that the heart of that dream was also seen by Jesus. So this is something deeply human in our, not only imagination, but in our capability. He saw this infant light, as the poem continues, decades before the cross, the tomb, and the new life. Okay. So even before Simeon knew what kind of story Jesus would be living out, yet he saw that light before he saw the cross, the tomb, and the new life. Okay. We don't know how this is all going to play out. We don't know what the story is going to look like in the future, even though I'm suggesting we need to tell the story again anew, but we don't know fully what that story is going to look like. Okay. And then Denise Levertov goes on to say, what depth of faith he drew on. Now, faith and belief are two different things, as you know. Okay. This sense, this deep, deep instinct, this sort of existential, experiential sense that yes, 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 this is possible. What depth of faith he drew on and turned illumined. Okay. So even Simeon was like, he felt the light in himself even. He saw it, but he also felt it in himself. And he was able to turn himself illumined with this towards deep night. And we are turning towards deep night in our planet with global warming, climate change. Oh my gosh, there's so much division, hatred, fear, distrust, meanness, violence. Okay. So we are turning toward deep night too, and are concerned about what is possible. And I would like to say to us guys, let us be like Simeon, who have seen a light. Okay. It's when Martin Luther King was told by Mahalia Jackson, tell them about the dream. Tell them about the dream, Martin. Okay. Let us tell them about the dream. Jesus saw the dream. Now we're still trying to bring that into fullness. Okay. But tell them about the dream. So here we go again. Denise Levertov's poem. With certitude, Simeon opened ancient arms to infant light. Decades before the cross, the tomb, and the new life. What depth of faith he drew on, turning illumined toward deep night. Okay. I would love to hear from you kind of what you're making of my musings. Okay, and indeed they are that. Or as a friend on the East Coast said, my meanderings. As you can tell, I'm grappling with ideas that I've been exposed to: modernity, postmodernity, structuralism, post-structuralism, deconstruction. And of course, I've been caught by, I've heard the call of the kingdom of God, as have you. Okay. And I still hear it. And I'm still longing to respond to it fully in my flesh. Okay. So I'm just really curious to know what you make of what I'm fussing with, and how I am also sort of seeing this move of Christianity through empire, through modernity, and here we are in postmodernity. But I think that the time is ripe for Christianity to emerge, and not as an absolute, finite, fixed answer, but as a narrative that addresses some of our deepest longings, some of our deepest fears, some of our deepest loves. Okay, so I would love to know what you think. So to move into that plenary time, I'm going to read you the Listening Hearts guidelines. Okay, so these are guidelines, courtesies for how to listen and be with one another during this time. And we've got plenty of time for conversation, which I'm looking forward to. So Megan, why don't you put up the discerning listening guidelines? I'll read them. And let's just keep these in mind as we prepare for plenary session. Take time to become settled in God's presence. We may feel a little unsettled right now, but I'm going to give us a minute to settle. So take time to become settled in God's presence. Listen to others with your entire self: senses, feelings, intuition, imagination, rational faculties. Do not interrupt. Pause between speakers to absorb what's been said. Okay? My hope is there'll be time today for more of you to speak.
Well,
So pause between speakers to absorb what's been said. Don't formulate what you want to say while someone else is speaking. It's not easy to do. Speak for yourself only, expressing your own thoughts and feelings and referring to your own experiences, and avoid the hypothetical and steer away from broad generalizations. Don't challenge what others say. Listen to the group as a whole, to those who have not spoken aloud as well as to those who have. And generally leave space for anyone who may want to speak a first time before speaking a second time. And then hold your desires and opinions, even your convictions, lightly. Okay. So I am going to ring the bell. I think when I did this last time, it was not right in front of the mic, so you couldn't hear the resonance of the bell. But I'm going to ring the bell. Give us about a minute to just sort of take a deep breath and sit with what I've been fussing with, and how does it sit with you? What is it provoking in you? What comments do you have about this? What are your thoughts? And is this helpful in terms of our thinking about telling the story again anew? So I'd love your feedback. Okay, so I'm going to ring the bell. Give us a minute, then I'll ring the bell again, and then I will call on Jeff to help us with this time of plenary time.
Why don't you have any sound?
I think I know.
Jeff Creswell, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Are you in Seattle?
Actually, I am in Seattle, and I have to give an apology up front, which is that I'm with two lovely 3- and 5-year-old granddaughters whose exuberant sounds you may hear in the background.
Well, and I have a 10-month-old puppy whose exuberance you have heard in the background. So we're in the same, we're
Yes.
together on this.
We're in good
There's
company.
plenty of room for them in
Yes.
our way of thinking, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, nice to see you, Jeff. I'm glad you're safely in Seattle. So
Thanks. Thanks.
okay, well, we have a good, half hour to kind of bounce off of some stuff I've been thinking and to get some ideas from others. So, I'd love for you to help facilitate this. I did not tell you I was going to do this, Jeff, because I just thought of it right this second. But I'd love to hear from you for a second, since you're a friend, you're a colleague, but you and I, we fuss around what is going on with Christianity today and what's possible, and whose narrative is it, and all of this kind of stuff. Do you have any kind of anything you want to say in response to kind of my thoughts this morning?
Wow. So many.
I didn't cue you. Pardon?
I said I have so many thoughts that and it's been absolutely fascinating to watch the chat light up.
Okay, great.
We're on fire. I kept trying to keep track, and the avalanche has hit, and I can't keep up.
Oh,
so I think there's been a lot of.
I hope I don't get buried in the avalanche, but.
Well, I guess what struck me the most is that really we're talking about an embodied, we're talking about hopefully a movement toward an embodied faith.
Nice. And I did not use that language, so I love this.
And so we have learned, I think, actually from modernity, that our head is the most comfortable place to live. And not only is it the most comfortable place to live, but it's, as you would say, it's the privileged place to live. And I think that we're in an age where we are seeing the limits of that.
Right.
And
so much for the great age of reason.
So much for the great age.
Look where it's brought us.
Look where it's brought us. Absolutely. And to understand that, I think for me, the biggest aha in what you shared was the fact that in those dualities, the first was privileged.
Mm-hmm.
The first was privileged. So for example, light and dark.
Mm-hmm.
Light is good and dark is bad. So if the first is privileged and we start linking these dualities together, light is good, dark is bad. And we could go on and on and on like that. And I think we're seeing how that just doesn't capture the reality of our lived experience.
White, non-white, to use the light and dark. Man, right. Woman.
Correct.
As though those in themselves are pure categories.
Correct.
Whatever,
Yes. So that's where I was as I was frantically writing to capture all the chat. And I just want to say right up front that there is no way that we are going to be able to get to everyone's comments.
Okay.
They're rich, and we could spend an hour on the comments that are in here.
Okay.
But I'll try to, capture some of what's here, and I'm trying to clump things together so that we can hear lots of different voices and perspectives.
Perfect.
So
thank you, Jeff. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. I would like to invite Jackie Yerby. You had a comment. about particle physics and faith.
Oh, good, good, good.
Oh my goodness. I am
Hi,
so not,
Jackie.
hi, Marianne. I am so not camera ready.
Oh, that's
Good morning. I love quantum physics, quantum mechanics, completely don't understand it, which I'm told is like the first part of understanding. And that is my dog, Phoebe.
and Theo is actually just made an acknowledgement here.
And so the kind of the I guess the curiosity about like quantum physics, the curiosity about faith, and sort of the acceptance of the unknowing. And I want to say that there is a book out there, I may actually have it, on like quantum mechanics or quantum physics and God. And just like how like it wanted, like how they explain each other. And I don't think it's a kind of scientific, like this is how Jesus walked, how it was possible that Jesus walked on water, because maybe it was like cold that day. There was actually a story in Time magazine years ago around Easter, and I was like, come on, people. So anyway, I just
the efforts we go to try to prove these things according to.
But just the idea of like the particle, like how we experience it impacts like what it is, I think is foundational to like faith and like quantum physics. So that's, I loved that you used that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Jackie, I'm with you on how fascinating this quantum, quantum observer of the quantum mechanics and what happens. It's absolutely fascinating. Now that's the nature of reality, right?
Yeah.
So for us to then think about just what you've said it so beautifully, but I think that is going to stir our imaginations.
Well, and I'll just say one other thing, and it makes me think back to seeking God in the 21st century. And oh my gosh, I can't even think of it. The whatever the school of theology is, where we are walking with God, where God is wanting us to be a partner and to provide God with kind of the energy, to do this work in the world. And so to me, that's kind of related to what you were saying about the particle and how we engage with the particle influences what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very interesting. And that notion of, God, that passage about, God emptied himself into the world. But what is so provocative about that is that we're the ones that embody God.
Yeah.
God needs us.
Yeah.
Embodied.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, what a thought, right? So, and then that change, and then how we act in the world, and it changes everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's all fascinating, and I think it's hopeful. Okay, now we have to make some important decisions, and we can't just think the stuff. We have to do it.
Yeah.
Truth is really more about doing than thinking, in spite of all the time we spend thinking. So we have to make this is a time of decisions where this is really a critical time, urgency. But I've not given up hope yet.
I haven't either.
God knows what it's going to look like, but I haven't given up.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Anyway, it's so nice to see you, Jackie.
So lovely to spend the Saturday with you.
Thank you.
Okay,
You
thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. I think sort of piggybacking on that, Jim High had a comment. Jim, you talked about, is a fantasy heaven with God and Jesus so important? And then you referenced namaste, which I thought was really interesting. Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Your mic?
You're muted, Jim.
Unmute.
There you go.
Unmute.
There we go.
I feel like that Christianity's gotten to the point where they're trying to justify God. And that we need to realize that life is God. And all of us have life. And we know what a perfect life would be like. We know what it would be like if there wasn't war, if there wasn't illness, if there wasn't sickness, if there wasn't jealousy and racism and all those things. And we can make that happen. I don't think God can make it happen because I really don't think there's a God. And so I just think it's up to us to do the work. And that Christianity needs to move in that direction. But I see Christianity with 40,000 denominations, which says that everybody's got a new idea about what to do. And then you've got Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus and all other kinds of religions. And we really just need one. We need to understand that life is the only thing that is common among every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And if we all treated everybody the same, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, we'd be fine. That's just my comment.
Jim, I think that's great. And if we think of God as a word symbol,
it is.
Word symbol, in a sense, what you're describing, I like that as a way of saying, what is the word symbol God? It's life.
Well, that's the reason I use the word namaste. I really like that because it's saying to that other person, I recognize the God that's in you because that God is the same God that's in me. And I can use God only as a symbol for the spirit of kindness, forgiveness, concern, care, all of those things. Worthiness, you know.
Well, Jim, I recognize that in you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and it's
Namaste.
nice to see you face to face because I'm familiar with your name and your work. So
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Marianne, there's another Marianne on the call, Marianne. And she had a comment about the Christian celebrations and how do we look at Advent and Christmas? So Marianne, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes, I think I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and I've been thinking that evolution, you've talked about the various philosophical, existential type of philosophies that have changed over the years. And it seems to me that evolution of faith or evolution of ideas goes in parallel with evolution of the human species. We are basing, we are based on what came before. And then I thought the next festival that, is celebrated in the Christian church is Advent and Christmas. And I was wondering how in this sort of deconstruction, postmodern, I mean, I have to look it up every time I use these words. But how can we, or how do you present it to your parishioners, the people who listen to you, in terms of evolving from the tradition to a more human, non-supernatural way of thinking?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Okay. Mm-hmm. So how do I do that? How do we do that? I won't go into that in any length right now, but I really want to make a note, Jeff, of the question of how do we take this slightly different way of understanding what we're about into Advent, okay, which is, this came up last time too, about Advent means to come.
Mm-hmm.
So what is to come? By the way, next time I'm going to talk a little bit about the Messianic, which has to do with how do we understand what is to come. Okay, so I'll do a little effort on how do we talk about Advent in these terms. Okay, mm-hmm. So I'll make an effort at that next time. But and then in terms of Christmas and the incarnation, okay, again, I think there are ways to use the imagery of the stories and the themes, the biblical themes, okay, but how do we open them up in a way that addresses our modern, postmodern, our current questions and experiences, our existential sense of things. How do we open up these stories to address us? Okay. Now, I think that one reason these stories continue to be sounded and listened to is because they're kind of in the David Tracy category, kind of classics. They're not histories particularly, but they're classic stories that address themes that are deeply human. But if we literalize these stories and reduce them and over rationalize them, then they lose all of their, there's no life in them. That's what's starting to happen, okay? But if we read these stories more theopoetically, okay, what are these stories trying to affirm? Or what are these stories actually asking? Or what's stirring in these stories that even gave birth to these stories? If we get more curious about that, I think it'll give us much more to talk about.
Mhm.
And that may not have answered your question very directly, but I think that there are ways to talk about the Christian stories, but in a different way, with different lenses.
In a way, if I can ask here, the stories, if you like, it could be Christmas, it could be Easter, it could be whatever, it doesn't really matter. But it's how do we use the new interpretation, if you like? You know, we talk about progressive Christianity. How do we use that new interpretation to make sense without the unbelievable? You know, how
Correct.
can it support living without the unbelievable?
Correct.
You see what I mean?
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
So I think that the how do we think about this stuff is really important. And I think that's what deconstruction is calling us. It's like, how are you thinking about this? And we need to move into a different style of thinking. And for instance, theopoetic thinking is a different style of thinking than rationalism.
Okay, thank you.
And so, and I think that supernatural theism is a way to try to answer questions that are trying to answer, they're answering the wrong question in a way. I won't go down that road, but I love what you're saying. I think there is the how are we going to go about retelling these stories? That's a really wonderful question.
And
And I
in a
think
way,
there is another way. There is another way out. I mean, in a sense, we're experiencing our own exodus.
Yeah.
There's
how do
another
we
way out.
keep the richness of we have without throwing the baby with the bathwater?
Correct. And I think there is a way, which is why I say tell the story again anew.
Okay.
But we can't tell the story in a modern context anymore. It's flattened out. It's completely flattened out. There's no blood, you know, it's bloodless. Okay. So how do we tell the story again anew? I think we can tell the story, but we have to do it differently.
Thank you.
And we may find that it's pointing to different things as well.
That's right.
It may become a wave. And
evolution.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anyway, thanks, Marianne.
Thank you, Marianne. Billy, this is a wonderful conversation. Hal and Martin Johnson had a comment referencing Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass. I thought was very interesting.
And Jeff, you have read that book, so maybe you can have a comment on this, okay? So, so please go ahead.
Are Hal and Martin Johnson, are you still on the call?
There. How's that?
Good.
Yes, it's Marty, actually.
Oh, Marty, okay, thank you.
Double names on there.
Yeah.
I have just recently encountered Kimmerer and her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And I listened to a webinar with her earlier this week and was captivated by her idea. At our church, we've been doing a lot of work in racial justice. And of course, the topic of restoration comes up all the time. What do we do about that? What does it mean? She presented that in terms of restoration, telling the story anew, which is kind of what we're talking about here. So that just captured my attention. I really don't have anything else to contribute to that.
Wow.
But I thought it tied in beautifully with what you're saying today.
Wow. Well, thank you for that, because that's a lovely to re-story.
Restoring, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's lovely. Lovely. Don't you
Yeah.
love what language can do? I mean, it's a perfect example of the language that, oh, that opened up a different insight. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I also think it's important to acknowledge the fact that Robin Wall Kimmerer is a Native American woman who is bringing Native American spirituality and applying it in the scientific world in a way that's opening science up.
Mm.
And so this restorying is so interesting, that we, in the binary system that we've operated in for so long, we've absolutely excluded other ways of knowing, which have
Correct.
continued to flourish on the edges, thankfully.
Mhm.
And now that everything seems to be falling apart, they seem to be moving back in.
Fascinating.
So anyway.
So, if the center cannot hold, maybe something is being, that now there's some space for something else.
Now there's some space for some other things. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. That's lovely.
Jennifer Maluski, you had an interesting comment about how we must deconstruct ourselves as listeners and shapers of meaning. Could you?
Nice.
Oh, yes. So I just want to say that everything here that you say resonates with me greatly.
Thank you. That's a thank you.
Yes, greatly. And my own background is in narrative and story, and how do we story ourselves?
Okay.
And how do we story our communities? And
nice.
So yes, and I attended a gathering of so my own denomination is United Methodist, and we're grappling a great deal with what the future of our denomination is going to be. Some of us feel like we're really fighting for the soul of our denomination at this moment. But I went to a gathering of a group of people who were looking at leaving the denomination and forming what they called the Liberation Methodist Connection, which they've gone ahead and done. But as they were grappling with this, they had a speaker who called upon them and said, you have to recognize, like, in your desire to reinvent Christianity, realize a new possibility in it. And this was not necessarily exactly in line with the kind of possibility that you're talking about, but they were really grappling with things at a base level. What does it take to sing a new song?
In a strange land.
Yeah. And and the speaker said, look, you have to reckon with the fact that, since Constantine, Christianity has been part of repressive systems. So he said, I'm going to make an analogy. He said, every so often I like to smoke a cigar. And when I smoke a cigar, you can take the same seed that's from Havana, planted in different soils, the same seeds, the same DNA, but when you make a cigar out of it, it tastes different because of the dirt that it has been planted in. And he said, so what this seed of possibility that you're looking at, what is the dirt that you're going to plant it in that is going to make it come up different than what Christianity has been before, this repression that you see, that you're grappling with, that you're trying to avoid? He said, so he gave an analogy of like, suppose you're working with the theory of gun violence, right? At the level of fruit, you might be looking at gun violence. If you look down and see, okay, at the level of the trunk, you might look at our justice system. If you look down at the root of that, you might look at what our very notions of justice are. But deeper than that is the dirt work. So when I talk about deconstructing ourselves, it's like we have dirt work to do. And this, the very process of deconstruction, again, it's the cry that comes from the Black Lives Matter movement, as far as I, as a sort of elite white person, understand it at this point. But of that, like, from where are you listening?
Nice.
And to be aware of the things that shape your own listening, and to deconstruct at that level and be responsible for it. I love the responsibility aspect that you're talking about that. And I think there's also, I put in my comment, there's also a level at which we're going to be called, as we create this new thing, to be responsible for all what you refer to as the modernist and all of the blood that's been spilt in the name of that. That somehow, in singing the new song, we're going to have to be responsible for that. So anyway, just love these talks, and just that's where I was coming from.
And I love your invitation, but also the imperative that we need to deconstruct our own stories and look more deeply and honestly at what has given rise to who we are. And and I think you and I are on the same page on this, that I actually am holding out for humanity's goodness and marvel and wonder. And we're courageous, but we're also fragile. So our deep capacity for love and care, we know we need to be cared for. We know we need to care. We know that. And it's courageous, it's gotten us here, and it's also fragile, okay? But I hold that infant light as the very light that will illumine our way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Ann.
Thank you, Jennifer, really appreciate what you're saying.
Thank you. Houston had a comment about the theologian Langdon Gilkey.
Oh, my goodness.
Houston, are you still with us? There we go.
Your microphone, mute. There you
Okay.
go.
There we go.
Yeah, I heard Langdon Gilkey speak about 15 years ago.
Oh, I envy
theology. And he noted that from his perspective, the rise of the evangelical movement in the 30s and 40s, which was also a response to the horror of 2 world wars, because people just could are very fearful, very anxious about the end of rules of how to live, that there are some absolute principles that inform us how to make decisions. And that leaves a void. And many people attempt to fill with an evangelical right-wrong approach to Christianity. So that's what he was getting at. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer used to say, to no principle can you withdraw. You have to make decisions on your own without people telling you religiously or whatever what to do. So that's my comment.
Well, yeah, and if I may say, Langdon Gilkey is great. So interesting. Shantung Compound is how I got to be familiar with his thinking, but it's an important little book. In times of crisis, there is a tendency for the intensification of norms. And here we are in postmodernity and then some, okay? And here's this reflex for the intensification of norms, which is, I think, what you're saying, Gilkey is saying, is that this move back to a kind of absolutism, as though that's our stability. Well, my suggestion is that we need to see it differently, because that assumption that those fixed categories are weight-bearing walls are not, the house is going to fall, you know. So anyway, but Gilkey and Bonhoeffer are two really important voices. And thank you for giving them a hearing through your own voice as well.
I know I'm not supposed to interrupt here, but I just have to say, I do hope the house falls.
Well, it's Jesus wept over Jerusalem.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
weeping now. And I think that I think that the temple is falling.
Yeah.
And not one stone will be left upon another.
Yeah.
But my friends, do not lose heart.
Right.
Okay, don't be afraid, because there's something more to come, and that's event.
Yeah.
That's something. There's something more that eye has not heard, nor eye has not seen, nor ear heard. But there is something more coming. At least that's my
hope. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd like us as quasi-Christians, real Christians, devoted Christians, I'd like to think we're the faithful remnant. That's kind of, forgive me for that. But that we, of all people, we cannot lose hope. We are people of hope.
Yes.
We're not sure what it's going to look like, but please, please don't, as the Dalai Lama says, don't ever give up. Don't give up.
And hope is not a state of being, but an action.
I think that's right.
And we can't stop taking the next step, even though we don't know where it's going.
I think that's right.
Rebecca Yost had a comment about the disciples after the death of Jesus. Hello, Rebecca. Do you want to unmute yourself? There we go.
I'm trying. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes, well, while you were talking, as a Christian, the whole story, it's not just parts of it, it's Advent and then Christmas, it's the garden and the death before. And I was thinking about how the disciples must have felt when Jesus died. Everything that they were living for and the exuberance of this man was ripped to shreds.
Right.
And they went into hiding. It was like, am I up to this? It's like, what are we going to do? And they went into the darkness and they went into hiding and they were afraid. And that's just kind of what came up for me when you were talking. It's like, that's kind of where we are right now, maybe socially and personally. Yeah. I think I've said this before. I feel like I'm being deconstructed. Everything that's ever worked for me is not working. I will light the Advent candles, but it's not the same.
Right.
It's not the same.
I hear you.
And it's like, that's just what came up for me. And I feel like I'm in a free fall. Okay. It's like, there's nothing to hang on to. And I'm just free falling or just sitting with stuff. Yeah. I just sit with it. Like, go out on the patio, watch the birds. The sky's blue and there are people dying all over the place. It's just, I've got a low battery. I'm so sorry. Okay. But anyway, I have a low battery. But that's kind of the part of the story that we don't want to look at, but it's there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at personally. And I want to say, Marianne, that this I've just joined. I mean, I think I've done this 2 or 3 times. And today was just amazing because it puts things in perspective. It's like, we always want everything, I want everything to be harmony and love, right? It's like, that's who I am.
Avoidant. Yeah.
And that's not the way it is. And so I'm really struggling. But I also, a thought that I had was during the Dark Ages, I've heard that underneath there was this massive amount of creativity and life going on beneath the Dark Ages. Now, I don't know if that's, I think I've heard that. And I'm thinking, okay, I need to find, like she said, go deep, get into the dirt. I need to find out where these people are that are creative that I need to stay in touch with so that I'm not suffocated by the darkness, because the darkness wants me to die and go away. And the light, the light just keeps going, no, I've got to be light. I got to be light. And the light and the darkness, to die is to live is to die. All these storytelling things are fighting to stay alive, I guess. Anyway.
Right. And for us, keep up the good fight.
Oh, yes. But it's so hard. I thought of the disciples. It's like they went into hiding. It's just, you want to run, you want to hide, you want to like, oh my God. And then the fascinating thing is that something gave birth on the other side of that.
Exactly. You go through an opening and it's something that the classical world didn't think was possible happens. Okay. Yeah. I think we're going through an arrow.
Yes.
Okay. And I love the story about the Dark Ages and the creativity underneath. I don't know if that story is true or not, but I know that story is true. Okay. We need to make it true. And we might be that. So be that. Yes. You are that. And yes, we'll, and I think another thing that the early disciples went through, I mean, I'm sure that when Jesus was executed, it's like, oh my gosh, is it all, but something was compelling enough that Jesus died, but the vision didn't.
Right. So
and
fascinating.
2,000 years later. Okay. It's like, wait a minute, the vision, I have a dream. The vision is not on yet. Right. I was going to say something related to, anyway, that doesn't matter. It'll come back. So, be that creative, be that infant light underneath that darkness. And oh, I know what I was going to say about the early disciples. Part of how they built community was that it was a common concern about the violence in the empire.
Yes.
We come together because it's like we're coming together against that violence. Mm-hmm. And so, and there are a lot of us, okay? So we're coming together around what else is possible.
And so the doing is where I am going to have to be pushed, because I'm up here.
Yeah.
It's comfortable in my brain. I know so much about all the bad things that are going. I'm not doing anything about it. I'm sitting here going,
you're watching the birds, you're listening to the birds, and love your neighbor. And you know what? Love yourself while you're at it.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
And don't give up. You're not alone, my friend. You're not alone.
No.
You have lots of company.
Well, I saw a T-shirt this morning when I was out walking, and it was said, "Just do it."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went, yeah.
And try not to get overwhelmed, because I know how easy that is.
I tend to be very easily overwhelmed and anxiety. And it's just like, no, don't. But anyway.
Well, to borrow from Jim High, namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you all for just being in the fray. And I do think we are the remnant. There's always a remnant. A rag maybe.
Right.
As you were talking about the story of the Dark Ages, Carol leaned into me and said, all stories are true and some actually happened.
Yes, there you go.
So there we go. Anyway, Marianne, we're at time, I'm afraid. I hate to stop because literally in the last 5 minutes, we've had 15 new questions come in. So
Oh, wow.
people, I'll just let you know that if you go down to the bottom of the chat where it lets you type your message, there's 3 dots. If you click on those 3 dots, it allows you to save the chat. And so if you want to do that, it'll save the chat to your desktop and you can go ahead and read those comments afterwards and see what things people had to say.
Great.
So,
And the chat, I do believe, is going to be posted on the website as well. So, and I'll see the chat later. I don't see it now, but I will be really interested in that. And yes, here's where I wish we had more time too, but, and we're over, but thank you. And keep these thoughts and concerns and restlessness. Keep that restless heart. It's fine. It's fine. It'll lead us. It's leading us on. Okay. In closing, okay, let me say that the next session, December 11th, I am going to talk a little bit about the Messianic. And I'm going to borrow quite a bit from Jack Caputo, but how do we understand the coming of the Messiah? And let me give you just a little teaser that if the Messiah were really to show up, he would ruin everything. That's a quote from Jack Caputo. And we can just see what he might mean by that. I actually love that little provocative remark. Our closing music today is a song called Waiting for Lightning, Waiting for Lightning. And it is by Stephen Curtis Chapman, but it's sung by a guy named Fran McKendry, Fran died this last June of cancer. He was 74. I knew Fran, and he's a wonderful, wonderful human being, and was one of the co-founders of Soul Awakening, which is an annual conference, which is interested in, how do they put it, providing sustenance, sanctuary, and inspiration. Okay. So Fran McKendry's dearly, dearly missed. And he sings this song, and I love the way that he sings it. And I'm going to read you the lyrics. We're also going to post them, but I'm going to read you the lyrics because I think this song kind of speaks to where maybe many of us are. That in a way we're waiting for. Is there another sign that it's time for a change? Are we still waiting for a sign that it's time for a change? Okay, and the imagery that he uses is thunder and lightning. Okay. Well, I suggest that we've already seen the light and that there's a flicker deep in our own hearts. It's saying the time is now. We need to look and to listen. We're part of this new change. And we are people who have a desire for what is to come and a hope for it. Okay. And that we are part of something new. We are part of the change. And I think Second Saturday Conversation is too. Okay. So here are the lyrics for Waiting for Lightning. Thank you so much for being with us this time. For those who can still stay, I'll see you at coffee hour or at coffee time. And see you next month, December 11th. Standing on the edge of the truth, looking out at the view of all you used to believe, from where you are, you can see you're far away from home. Echoes of the life you once knew call out to you from across the divide. And you know it's time to step back over the line, but you're waiting for lightning, a sign that it's time for a change. And you're listening for thunder. And God quietly whispers your name. Night falls and the curtain goes down. No one's around. It's just you and the truth. And you lie in wait for a feeling to take you by storm. Somewhere in the depths of your heart, where it's empty and dark, there is a flicker of light. And the Spirit calls. But do you notice at all? Are you waiting for lightning? A sign that it's time for a change? And you're listening for thunder while God quietly whispers your name? But the sign and the word have already been given. And now it's by faith. We must look and we must listen instead of waiting for lightning. A sign that it's time for a change. And you're listening for thunder while God quietly whispers your name. God quietly whispers your name. And in the syllables of your name, when you hear the syllables of your name, your life is changed by the call. And we are the response. Thank you for your time and your thoughts and your heart and your care and your hope. And I look forward to seeing you next month. And peace be with you. Here we go. Okay. Well, here we are at coffee time. I just put myself on, hi, Tom. I just put myself on gallery. So now I have at least a little view of some of you. So my friend, Jeff Creswell, Jeff and Carol, they're both very dear friends. Do you want to, again, help us with this time and sort of remind us what this time is and isn't about?
Yeah, this is really a time for people who stayed on the call, who want to have a more personal interaction with you, Marianne. So it's not so much a continuation of the conversation that we just had, which, as I said, could have gone on for another hour.
Well, actually, I hope it does in your own settings.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I think you've spurred a lot of people to want to explore further these ideas, which is wonderful. So I would just suggest, if you would like to speak to Marianne, that you just put that in the chat. Another way that you can let us know is that if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there's a little spot that says reactions. And if you click on that, you can raise your hand. And then that will show up on your video. And then I'll know to call on you. And it looks like, Jim, you found that spot. So I will let you go first. Jim, you're muted.
I was going to ask, give me the name of that book that was featured at the beginning. Marcus's book about, I can't remember.
The God We Never Knew.
Yes. When did that come out?
Well, that's a great question. A long time ago. I mean, it could have been, gosh, it could have been even 20 years ago. But The God We Never Knew. Yeah. I love that book, by the way.
Is it available?
It is.
Still?
Yes, still. Yes, it is.
Well, I'll get it
Good,
for sure.
good. Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to mention was, in thinking of the new language.
Oh, and I love this. Jill just put up the cover, and that's the original cover. That's the same cover I have too. Great.
Yeah. In thinking of the new language, Marcus did a book with the sayings of Jesus and the Buddha. And it's a delightful coffee table size book. The only thing that I objected to, I didn't really object, but the only thing I noticed was he always put Jesus's quote first and then the Buddha's. And actually the Buddha said his first.
Well, yes, right. Historically first, but there's that preference of the first one listed.
Yeah.
But anyway, that is a great book. That is a great book to use to reconstruct Christianity. Nice. Because people need to understand that it's all about this inner feeling that everybody on the surface of the earth has.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
It's not about certain beliefs that we have to have.
Yeah, nice.
I love that book.
Thank you, Jim. And I did not ask Jim to do that, but it is the holiday season. He said it's a complicated book. This might be just the thing to.
That's right. It'd be a great gift for anybody. Really.
Well, thank you, Jim. That's lovely. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Done.
Another book that Carol just mentioned is Marcus's book, The First Christmas, which would also be a great one too.
That's great. That's great.
Questions about Advent and Christmas. So
lovely. Thank you, Jeff.
And
yes.
Jill, thanks for holding up the book.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And my dear beloved Marcus, his shelf life is lasting longer than he has. So I'm delighted that he lives through his books.
Well,
I would say thank you for mentioning the book, because I went to my bookshelf. I opened it up and I realized I had it on my shelf, but I hadn't read it. So while you're talking, I'm going through the book and starting my highlighting. So thank you.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. This will be a nice read during the season. And
Chell held up a little card that said it was published in 1997.
Oh, in 97.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Jill, for that. Yeah. So it's been, wow. Well, a lot of what Mark wrote, it's still as fresh as could be. It's still as applicable. It's still as timely. It's still as prescient. It's still, yeah.
Yeah. It makes me think of the Martin Luther King quote.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
May not get there with you, but
I have seen, yes, but I have a dream. I have a dream.
Yeah. Lynn Neckel, am I saying that correctly? Lynn, you're still muted.
There you go. No, Lynn Wegner. I had wanted to say to Marianne that I consider Marcus and probably Dom Crossan as two of my mentors, although I never met Marcus. And Dom, I was living in International Falls, Minnesota, and Dom came there to do 2 seminars a year apart.
Fabulous.
Or a lot of the work that they did together, and it was just fabulous.
Yeah.
Just fabulous.
Yeah, Dom is great. Dom is a wonderful and
yeah. Well, both of them
very good friends.
And I think what they've written is going to last for a very long time.
Thank you. I do too.
I really do. It's fresh and new. And it's given me such hope for the church, which is helpful.
Which is what Mark had. Mark had hope for the church.
Oh yes, I know he did.
That educating us anew would be the very thing that would help to do a course correction in a sense.
Right. Yeah. And I've used their DVDs and stuff to teach. So I really just want to say thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I'm sorry you didn't meet Mark in the flesh.
Oh, I am too.
You would have loved him.
I know that. And there were several times when I had wanted to go to one of the retreats or something like that, and just had not been able to get away. Yeah. I was still working then.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. Thank you. And keep helping your community to see things anew. Okay. And you've got good resources and you've got your own good sense of things. So
yeah, we try to do that and then find out that the people who come are the people who are already in
members of the choir.
Yeah, a member of the choir. That's right.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. And then
it's still helpful because we still raise issues and we have wonderful discussions. So
perfect.
It's very good.
Keep that flame alive. Keep it alive.
Yeah.
Good.
Thanks,
Lynn.
And we have another Lynn Wegner, who has a question for you, Marianne.
Okay. While we're finding her, hello, Tom Dunham. I see you.
What is the name of the book with Marcus Borg and the Buddha sayings?
Yeah, Jill, or Jim, what is the actual title of that? Is it the?
Someone's put it in the chat.
Oh, good.
Is it the parallel?
Jesus and Buddha, the parallel sayings.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's another 1997 book.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, and look at this. I love it. Roberta has, she's showing that Jesus, and there's the cover of the book. I love it. And I must, yes, and here Jesus is on top. Oh my. Oh, well. You know what? Sometimes we just can't help it. Oh dear. But that's right. Historically, the Buddha, you know, he came way before Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was wondering, Tom, if you had something you wanted to say to Marianne.
Yeah, great discussion, Marianne. This is one of the best, and I certainly appreciate that. And about Simeon, one comment, in the Orthodox, there's an icon and a lot of icons. Simeon was present at the presentation of Jesus, and in the Orthodox Church, he's called the receiver of God. So this is an interesting little sidelight. So
it is.
And he has a halo around his head, and so he's been sainted.
Yeah, the receiver of God. Wow. And did I suggest that we are like Simeon?
Yes, yes. I
think
we should be like Simeon.
We should be like,
He could be a role model for us, that's for sure.
Yes, receiver of God. Hi, Darlene. Yeah, receiver of God. I love it. Well, there's another gift suggestion for this year to, you know, send an icon of Simeon to your fellow Simeon. Yeah. Yeah, the Simeon Society. How about that?
We should start one.
Anyway, really nice to see you, Tom. Tom, Darlene, and Mark and I, we traveled together to Jerusalem, and
very fond memories, wonderful memories.
Yeah, me too. So we've been on the road together.
We're on the road with Paul.
And yes, and on the road, and on the road with Paul.
Marianne, this is not related and probably not the time to ask you, but we had sent a check off to you and it came back a week ago. So I'll have Jeff send us the address to send it to, but
you may have sent it to
a journey around
it took a journey.
The country.
It was in the dead letter department.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Well, this is also lovely that you're encouraging people to send their checks.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
it's a PO box 935, right? You probably sent it to the old PO box. So
I think so. It's PO box
935 in Bend, Oregon 97709.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
It'll be coming.
Thank you in advance, my friends. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
And Darlene, thank you actually for bringing up the topic of money, because it's a topic that is like bamboo shoots under the fingernails for Marianne. Yes. However, I'm not Marianne, so I can talk about it freely and say that, you know, Marianne offers these second conversations gratis because she wants them to be accessible to everyone. And that is a huge gift to all of us who have the privilege of being here.
Well, and if I was charging for this, I'd feel even worse.
And so anyway, if you are finding this a time, something worthy of your time, consider making a financial gift to the foundation so that we can continue to offer these things, because as you can well imagine, there's quite a lot of time and expense involved in putting together something of this caliber. So, and I'm also aware, Marianne, that we're kind of out of time. And it's been lovely to have so many people stay on to spend time with you, but I thought you might like to say a final word of closing during this.
Yeah, I'm actually going to read what I consider to be a prayer from Jack Caputo. But before, Jeff, can I take the liberty in 2 minutes of just having people just maybe say a word, just say a word or two, but not really a statement about, let it be a blessing to others who are hearing you, or some kind of affirmation. Okay, so does anybody want to just shout out a word, an affirmation, whatever?
I think that's great, Marianne, and I think we can invite people, everybody, to unmute and do it at the same time. It'll be a beautiful cacophony.
Okay, and then I will close with a prayer from John Caputo.
Great.
Peace. Live in the mystery.
Peace of the Lord be with you.
Coming home. Ephesians.
Samud. Pax vobiscum.
Namaste.
Ecum spiritu tuo.
We can do it.
Namaste. Namaste.
Good.
That was a prayer right there, Marianne.
Indeed. So a prayer that I think maybe all of us now, I think this is a prayer that is our prayer. To what do I pray? Over what do I weep when I pray and weep to my God? For what am I hoping, sighing, dreaming when I hope and sigh and dream of my God? For what am I inviting, calling, promising when I invoke my God? For what do I call when I call what is to come? By what am I impassioned in my passion for God? To what am I promised? To what do I consent in this pact with the impossible? What do I expect when I expect the impossible? There's a question that's there's a prayer that's full of questions. Okay. So thank you for being with us. And thank you for being there, and carry on the conversation in your own settings. All right. What do we expect when we expect the impossible? Okay. See you next time.